Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon if you happen to be on the East Coast, and welcome to today's conversation. My name is Wes Yee. I'm the Senior Director of Growth at Guru, and I'm joined today by Amanda Cleo, for the Chief Customer Officer from Figma. Happy Halloween,
Hi,
Amanda.
happy Halloween, Wes.
I know you told me before we jumped on the line here that you are dressed as a chocolate bar, which is a little harder to show on a small webcam. I'm Tigger, for those who are curious, but yeah, I thought we'd get in just real quick since it is Halloween with a couple quick icebreaker Halloween questions, and then we'll get into some of your background, your role at Figma, a little bit about the company, and then we'll jump into where I think we've seen most of the questions come in, which is around your role leading the customer experience, sales, and marketing teams.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, first off, being Halloween, I have to ask you if you have any favorite Halloween costume from your childhood, your adulthood, anytime. If there's one costume that comes to mind, you just felt like this was my best costume ever.
Yeah, well, the chocolate bar actually comes from a Beta Breakers costume. I have two friends that come visit me for Beta Breakers, which is a race not on Halloween, but in May here in San Francisco, and everyone dresses up for it. And so we always have trio costumes. So one year we were s'mores and I was the chocolate bar. So that's what that comes from. But probably my childhood one costume that I remember is I was Smurfette one year, and that stuck out, the blue face.
How did you apply the blue, and how long did it last?
You know, it's I don't really remember that much from being 6 years old. So
Fair enough. Fair enough. And then do you have a favorite Halloween candy? What did you always rifle through your bag for?
I don't know. I like the classic Snickers, Skittles.
Chewy, chocolately,
Yeah,
delicious.
yeah,
All
yeah.
right. Well, hopefully you'll get your hands on some some of
Or
that
not.
today, or not. Yeah, fair enough. And then before we launch in, you mentioned that it's while it is Halloween, it's also kind of a special week at Figma. You've got some interesting things going on. I'll maybe throw it over to you for just a quick dip into that pool.
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, for those of you who aren't familiar with Figma, we're a design tool and based in the browser. And so people use us for all kinds of design work. That could be UX design, so product design, but really anything digital, brand design. And what's great about it is being based in the browser, uh, the design team collaborates with other people like engineers, marketers, product managers, and so being web-based just makes that collaboration process really seamless. And so just yesterday we announced our first user conference that we're going to have next year, which is super
Wow.
exciting. We're planning for February. And then last week we announced a new beta that we're starting, which is around community. And you can share your Figma files with the broader global community if you wish. And you can imagine companies already do this to some extent with UX toolkits and different developer toolkits where design work is nice to have as a starting point. And so we've just had a lot of customers been asking us for this, and so we're really excited to have that community aspect in our product now too.
That's
So
amazing. Yeah, I
yeah.
took a quick look at the post that you guys put up on, and I think it's these multiplayer capabilities is the other way you guys have described it.
Well,
Or
we actually multiplayer refers to the fact that you can co-edit files because it's built in the browser. And so that was one of our game-changing features that Figma started with 4 years ago. And so this community launch is really one of our next big plays beyond co-editing files and what that brings to the design space. The design department is actually one of the last departments and companies that's still downloading software. And so
hmm,
Figma has this great opportunity to disrupt that with web-based software.
got it. That's awesome. Well, I think we'll definitely get into more of how you guys are looking to do that in the conversation to follow.
Super.
But I wanted to start off just getting a little bit about your background. So you've been at some amazing companies, but would love to just kind of hear, some of the key points in your career. Just getting started, you've been like I said, a number of different companies. started at Agilent. Is that right? What in
Yeah,
was in
yeah.
Germany? Like maybe let's play.
I started in Germany. Yeah. I went on an exchange program right after undergrad to Germany through the government, and I got an internship at actually Hewlett Packard, and I worked in the IT department as a programmer, and then Agilent Technologies is a company that got spun off of HP. I ended up working in Germany for 5 years and eventually made my way back to the US, and I got an MBA at Yale. And right after that, I thought, I've worked in the back office for so long, I really want to be closer to the customer. And so I got a job in marketing at a SaaS business called Postini. It was a security SaaS company. And literally like the day before I started, it got acquired by Google. So, and I had wanted to work at Postini because it was a small company. So I thought, oh, okay, I guess that dream is on hold. So I went to go work at Google, which at the time was only a measly 20,000 people big, but still a big company. Had a good time working at Google, but then wanted to find a way to get back to my initial goal, which was working at a smaller company. And I got introduced to the CEO of Zendesk, who had just moved the company of 12 people to the US and was looking for their first marketer. So I joined and I ended up staying for 7 years, and I worked in different marketing and sales roles. When I left, we had about 2,000 people, 300 million in revenue, and we'd gone public. So it was a super fun ride to be on.
Was that a difficult decision? I mean, I guess it sounds easy after you kind of highlight the journey there, but I would guess that going from a 20,000 person company like Google to a 12-person company that just moved to the country wasn't something that everybody was, oh yeah, definitely, no brainer.
Probably when I was making the decision, it was hard because change is hard for me. I think for most people, change is hard, but I had done my own due diligence on the company and the founders, and I was ready to take a risk. But I also feel like we are lucky enough to work in a spot where there's a lot of jobs. So you're more able to take a risk, and if it doesn't work out, you can find another job. So I didn't think too deeply about whether or not I was going to be ruining my life or something. But I do feel really lucky to have found Zendesk because it was amazing.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll get into some of the things that you learned with your time there. But I guess the next step would be how did that path lead you to Figma? What was the step there?
Yeah, well, the founders of Zendesk are Danish, and they were very obsessed with good design and taught me to really appreciate good design, both from a product design perspective as well as a brand design perspective. And also some of my favorite colleagues at Zendesk were in the design department. So Figma, there was just a natural interest in the space already. But it was also I joined Figma about a year ago, and it is at a very exciting stage where when I joined, there was already product market fit, and they just needed to build out the go-to-market function more. So there was a lot of things that I brought to the table from Zendesk, but there was a lot of new things that I would be able to learn and grow from too. So it was a good opportunity from that standpoint.
And you joined as Chief Customer Officer, which is a job title that I'm seeing more and more of these days, where companies are seeing real value in bringing together certainly the go-to-market functions, but also customer experience, which I guess is, can in many companies be a part of that. Was that something that they were looking out to market? Hey, we want someone to come and fill this role, or was this something that you worked with them and said, hey, I actually have this background that I could apply to numerous areas?
Yeah, good question. So Chief Customer Officer was not who they were necessarily looking for. They were actually looking for a head of marketing. But I said, hey, I think that a business with a healthy self-service function, driven by marketing and good product, coupled with adding sales on top of it, you really need a leader who's thinking about the entire revenue picture. And so a lot of what I learned at Zendesk was, how do you do that? How do you have a self-service model as well as a sales model together? And that was one of my passions. So I pitched them, hey, why don't I take a look at marketing, sales, and support? Support being interesting to me too, because I had just basically sold software to support departments for 7 years, and I had a lot of knowledge about that function. So I made the pitch, and they bought
it. Was there, when you joined the company, like you said, just over a year ago, was there an area that you saw immediate opportunity with, that you said, hey, obviously want to have an impact with all these departments, with all these teams for our customers, but these are the couple of points that I really need to focus on in my first year?
Yeah, well, it was really clear to me that Figma had a huge role in the future of design tools. We're one of the few design tools that's based in the browser, and so it's like a Google Docs disruption kind of story. So we really just needed to figure out, how do we scale this business and get the word out, and do a lot of community marketing, and build out a sales team, figure out who we can go win and how we do it. And so it was, first and foremost, let me bring some structure and leadership to the go-to-market side of the business, and then decide who we need to hire next and how we scale things. So those were some of my first thoughts.
I guess I skipped a part of it there, which is like, what was the state of those different departments when you joined the team?
Yeah, well, when I joined, we had 60 employees total. So, I mean, and we still are in just the beginning stages of, building out Figma as a business. But, and it's mostly half and half product engineering, design, as well as then the go-to-market and FP&A kind of functions. So that's how it was when I started. And we only had 2 or 3 sales reps when I started. So it was just getting going. Our enterprise tier was still in beta when I started, and we were about to bring it out of beta. So it's really been this year that we've seen huge growth with customers adopting it in bigger ways.
Yeah, and could you just talk about like where your team has come in that year, and maybe a little bit about some of what the successes you're seeing with customers?
Yeah, definitely. We have more than doubled the size of the company in the time I've been here. And so we have roughly, maybe 50 people in go-to-market, pretty evenly split with marketing, sales, and support. We have success embedded in support and sales, so it's not a separate function. I'm a big believer in keeping things simple as long as I can, and we're still so small that I don't want to have a million different teams doing different things. So I like to hire people who can do a lot of different things and work together and like working together. That's my philosophy. So we've just basically built out the sales team quite a bit, but we've built out all the teams at Figma. So it's been fun.
Awesome. So I know we have a lot of people registered for this webinar that were interested specifically in customer experience. So I wanted to get into that, and then we'll come back and get into some of the sales and marketing pieces. But just right at the top, we hear so much today about how important it is to be measuring things. And, I'm even hearing from a lot of executives that their favorite style of measuring someone or some team is just give them a number and let them run with it and figure it out for themselves. I don't know what your style happens to be, but I am curious, how does your CX team measure success, or how do you measure the team's success?
Yeah, I definitely like numbers a lot, but I'm not going to die on the vine over only numbers. So I like to look at a lot of different things, but for sure, our support team is measuring CSAT. We're measuring NPS in the product. In fact, we put all of our NPS comments into a Slack channel for the entire company to see, and I see people reading those comments and making changes to things based on that. So we definitely do things like that. Um, I think from a support perspective, we're looking at some of our numbers more so on the fact of like, how do we build out the team? When do we need to hire more people and where? So we've looked at what's our request volume in different time zones. And so one of the things we've done this year is add some people into Europe to handle European time zone coverage. Our sales team, we're looking at all different kinds of funnel metrics and nothing special. It's all basic funnel metrics like logged out traffic and signups and whatnot. And we share all of those numbers together as a team. So, but for me, it's also about our customers happy and are we developing the product in the ways that both our customers want and we want to. So it's a mix of all of that.
And there was a question that came in from the audience. How do you choose what metrics to focus on when there is no customer satisfaction data? My guess, I'm not going to ask it in a leading way, but my guesses would be you need to start capturing that customer satisfaction data.
Yeah, I would say if you have some customers, even if it's just 5, you should already be asking them questions about their satisfaction. So if you're at customer count equals 0, I get it, but you're at a very different stage altogether. Yeah.
You mentioned a couple of ways that you guys are tracking these: CSAT, NPS. Are there any sort of like external things? Are you using like a G2 or any sort of like public reviews or different feedback mechanisms outside of your own internal surveys that you run?
Well, the design community is already very active with each other. So they're a very social group of people. They follow their design heroes on Twitter. They like to talk to each other, which is both a good and a daunting thing for us because we have to be on those social channels talking with them and engaging with them. We also have an online community through a product called Spectrum. So we have a few moderators that we use to provide Q&A support that way. We also have a whole user group program around the world where we bring people together through different evangelists and ambassadors of the product around the country. So there's a lot of different ways we engage with people, and we have a research department here at Figma that does surveys with customers about their use cases and needs and whatnot. So one of my favorite things that we do is how we develop our roadmap. It's very much a company-wide process, and our product team, of course, leads that, but they go around to each of the different functions and have really great in-depth conversations about how we should think about our roadmap each quarter. So I'm really loving the collaboration we have on that side of the house.
I'm super interested by, you talked about how active the community is of designers, which is certainly, as a marketer, very exciting when you have those people who are passionate about what they're doing that you can activate and add value to. Do you have people on your team that are fully responsible for that, or is it a portion of people's jobs? Do you have, I can imagine, people on the support team, on the success team, on any team, like being asked to go and participate in some of these communities is something they do naturally, or do you have people who are fully dedicated for that?
Yeah, we definitely have people dedicated to it. We have people dedicated in our support team for community support. That are focused and product education that are focused on how do we provide support at scale. And we're actually, that's probably the fastest growing part of our support organization right now because I'm a big believer in how do we scale support, especially when we have a free product as an entry point. We have a lot of free users. So, it's to our benefit to provide one-to-many support. And then on the marketing side, we have a few people that are dedicated to what we call community marketing. So that includes social channels, that includes evangelists that work with customers during beta periods, They work with developers developing on top of our platform. They run our user group program and do different events with users as well. So a lot of focused energy that way.
And you talked a little bit about how you have different types of customers who are on a freemium model, and certainly some who are paying, and you have an enterprise product as well. How do you engage those types of customers differently? How do you know which ones to give lots of attention to and which ones, I mean, there's some leading part of this is like which to leave alone. Well, maybe I'm not even sure. But how do you make those determinations?
Yeah, well, on the support side, we prioritize people based on their spend with us. So if you're on our enterprise tier, you go to the top of our support queue. And so that makes sense, right? We do actually provide human support to our freemium users. It's the SLA that we aim for there is a lot longer than for our enterprise customers. On the sales side and marketing side, I'd say, it's a matter of how do you scale for the right people. So, for a big customer, we might go do an on-site training, but for small customers, we might do a live stream like what you're doing right here, so we can capture a lot of different people all at once. So it's not really more complicated than that.
And is there any, there's a question that came in, how do you separate good teams from great teams? I guess, is there any Figma secret sauce that you've applied maybe from your lessons in previous roles, or?
Like internal teams, or what do you mean?
Yeah, for your internal teams, that, when they're interacting with customers, are there things that you think that you guys are doing that's particularly unique, or things that you personally feel strongly about that service teams need to be incorporating into their day-to-day?
Well, I also really like to actually ask customers whether they'd like to talk to sales. I know that's kind of a novel thought, but if someone, our sales team prioritizes talking to people who want to talk to them. And so that's kind of a nice way to be, I think, at least to start. I mean, we'll see how things evolve, but raising your hand from a customer perspective is a good starting point. And then after that, we take a look at product usage and try to identify who are good candidates to upgrade into bigger plans. So we're really thoughtful about, we're not just trying to talk to everyone. Let's figure out who actually makes sense to be in a different plan or product. So I'm a big believer in thinking about things from the customer perspective.
Yeah. Pivoting a little bit back to the customer experience team that you've been scaling, as you've scaled it, there's a question that came in. What resources would you bring in, and maybe we can even broaden it to just like, what were some of the challenges that you faced in scaling up that team? This person who asked is trying to go from 6 people all in one area to 30 people in potentially different locations. So maybe some of the challenges or things that you've thought about as you've been scaling your team.
Yeah, well, I mean, 6 people all in one spot versus 30 people in different locations is a big shift. So I assume that happens somewhat over time. And first and foremost, I think we're thoughtful about how fast we're adding more people into the team. So, you have companies that are super high growth that are 3 or 4xing the number of employees every year. And that feels a little out of control. It feels like, how do I maintain a culture and scale things responsibly? So we're definitely conscious of how fast we're doing that. But it starts with also just which processes do you need? How do you want people to communicate with each other? I suppose Guru might be a good tool to think about. We are not Guru users, I will be honest. So they're not paying me to say that, but it looks like a good tool to think about. But Slack, I think, is another tool that we use pretty heavily these days, and setting up the right channels for people to get information is important to me, so we can share. So like when our sales team goes on site, they'll usually with a customer, they'll usually take notes and then share those notes with the whole company so we can learn from that. And so we're pretty transparent. And I think that's been a big shift that I've seen in the last decade with companies, is just how transparent people are with information, and just helping people then onboard and understand who are our customers and what's on their mind in different ways beyond just watching our Twitter feed.
I've definitely observed that too. I'm curious if you have a hypothesis as to why that's been a shift.
I think just general internet trends, maybe. You know, Facebook certainly is creating a very different kind of world for us, and some of that's good and some of that's maybe not as good, but it definitely has changed in how we think about work too. And tools like Slack provide a lot more transparency, and so it's just breeding a new generation of people that know how to communicate that way, and I think that will continue to evolve. I still, I'll admit, I still think about emailing people before I think about Slacking sometimes, because I like the discipline of thinking about, okay, who's my message for, and who do I want to send it to, and what do I want them to think about? Whereas in Slack, you just kind of put it out there for anyone to see, and it feels like you could be a little lazier about that process. So yeah, I mean, we're all kind of evolving with the times.
Yeah, it's I sense that there's that employees demand more from their employers now.
Yeah.
From a transparency perspective, for sure, and we talked about this topic, but even from a corporate responsibility perspective, we see lots of companies where the workforce really feels like they deserve a seat at the table and a voice in even who the company is accepting as customers in some cases. And certainly I would think that would metastasize on a day-to-day basis, and people wanting to know everything that's happening with all their customers that they're working with, and with and the other teams that they work alongside.
Good points. Yeah, definitely.
And then back to the CX team, and this feels like maybe very tactical, but are there any tips that you would have for setting expectations when teams need more time to resolve issues with customers? Kind of a very broad question here, but I guess anything that you would throw out.
I would say, these are probably obvious to people, but just being honest. I think speaking with words that you would actually say out loud, maybe being specific when you can. So, if a tough problem comes in and you definitely need more time, like, hey, I really want to resolve your issue. I need some time to do some research on this. Maybe I have a product manager that mentioned something similar recently, but you're going to hear back from me within 24 hours with an update, and then actually get back to them in 24 hours, even if you don't have it resolved.
Yep.
Because I think it's when you make promises and you don't deliver on them, or you say things in the passive voice, that's when people get kind of annoyed.
Yeah. So really treating them like a human, being transparent with what you're doing to help solve their problem. Yeah, I think certainly. And sometimes the obvious or sort of most simple answers are the best ones.
Right. Yeah.
So, okay. I think we're going to go a little bit back towards, understanding how you balance, I've seen it phrased in a couple of these questions that we come in as like product-led growth versus sales-led growth, self-serve customers versus, companies that you guys have gone out to find, how you think about those throughout your funnel. So what is their journey? How do they, I don't want you to sit down and break down your whole buyer journeys for me, but what are some of the key differences in those two funnels and those two motions that you have set up internally at Figma?
Sure. Well, I'd say first and foremost, there's one funnel. I think about it as one funnel because everything right now is coming in initially as a sign up on our free plan. Whether you're in our self-service flow or our sales flow, you start that way. But there's different paths in the funnel. So we're looking at traffic, we're looking at signups, but then beyond that, you might convert to paid on your own, or you might convert to paid through a sales motion. And so we look at different metrics along the way there. And we look at are you signing up with a corporate domain or a personal domain? Where are you in the world? So we slice and dice metrics that way. We have a very viral product, so you can invite other people into the product. So we differentiate whether you are a Gen 0 sign up or a Gen 1 sign up. So did you sign up yourself or were you invited to sign up? And we'll track you that way. So those are some of the specific things for Figma.
What was that something that Gen 1 versus Gen 0, was that something that you brought over from previous experience, or was something that you realized with this product specifically there's a distinct difference in someone who finds it on their own and someone who's referred?
Figma was already tracking that way before I joined, so that's definitely not something I can take credit for. And in fact, at Zendesk, that wouldn't have applied, because Zendesk, you're selling into a whole customer support department, and there was no freemium model for a long time. So you're on a trial and then you're either going to convert or you're not. So it was a different model. So that's actually one of the fun things about Figma is it's familiar to me, but it is a little bit of a different model with different kinds of numbers. So that's been exciting to get part of.
With a product that does have a viral element to it, I'm curious how you think about removing friction and promoting growth in some of the loops that are focused on virality, where there is this element of some of the people that we talked about earlier who are like those heroes within the community. I would guess that they're a big part of this, or what are some of the ways that you think about how to activate some of that virality?
Well, self-service model is the same no matter what, where it's really about not having friction or providing information that people want at the right time. So if I'm about to make a purchase, how much does it cost? What am I buying? What can I expect after I buy? How long is it going to take to set up? Those are things I'm going to want to know before I make that decision. And I'm a big believer that if you want to have seamless experiences, you have to not just map out your customer journey once, but you have to do that on a regular basis. It has to be a habit that you get into as a company, because you're going to have new people joining all the time that don't have the context. You're going to be changing and probably adding more complicated things into that process. So you have to combat that by simplifying things. But the only way you can do that is if you map it out. Like literally go whiteboard, what are all the touch points you have with customers, and think about it from that customer perspective, because it's very easy to think about it from a company perspective. Like, oh yeah, of course we need to send this email because our systems require us to do that, and think about it that way. But if you focus on, well, wait, what's in the mind of the customer and what are they experiencing along the way, then you can much more easily identify where are the soft spots and where are the good spots of your journey.
I like that. It reminded me of that saying of certainly on the sales side, no one cares about your org chart. And so like the way that you deliver a sales and marketing experience needs to be consistent and seamless, and it shouldn't be, well, I need to ask this person and they'll get back to you. And it doesn't become a logistical challenge for the customer or the prospect. It's really, we as a company need to be serving them in a much better way, which it sounds like you guys are doing.
Yeah, before I joined Figma, I was helping a company think through how they could provide a more seamless experience. And I said, okay, well, why don't I be a fake customer and go through your process? So I did that. I signed up, and then I mapped out what emails I got and what they asked me and how I responded. And I showed them this journey. And as soon as they looked at it, they're like, oh my God, we're so embarrassed. But they just hadn't sat down and done that for a while. So they didn't realize that they were doing this back and forth with the customer like 4 or 5 times just to sort out billing. Totally unnecessary, but it's just like a legacy of adding things into the process without looking holistically at the whole process.
Right. There's always a good reason for everything I found within a company that doesn't make sense even. There's always someone has a good explanation for why it's like that. But at the
Right.
end of the day, if it shouldn't be like that, you just have to, everyone has to kind of let go of what happened and what that good reason might have been in the interest of what's best for the customer now.
Yeah. I used to have an old colleague who would say, you never want to show your ass to the customer. So that I think about that when
Yeah.
we're focused internally on stuff.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And it can be difficult because you think about it, unless you're really, taking the initiative to meet with and talk to and hear from customers on a regular basis, the people you spend most of your time with are the ones who are inside your company's walls, who are
Right.
thinking about it from your company's perspective. So really, really important to get out and to talk to customers. Is that something that I think I don't know if it's easier, but I certainly hear more of that sort of mentality from people who are more senior, who are in an executive role, where they think, yeah, I need to spend a lot of time with my customers, make sure I understand what the trends in the market are. How does that trickle down to some of the more frontline people who maybe don't have as natural a role where they're going to be talking to customers as often? I think certainly sales is going to be talking to customers or prospects, hopefully all the time. But like on the marketing side, there are certainly marketing people who, without taking their own initiative, might actually never talk to a customer if they're sitting in front of a computer most of the time doing marketing operations or doing design or something. Like, how do you encourage that for people who maybe it isn't built into their day to day?
Yeah, it's funny. I had a feeling you were going to ask me about this, and I was thinking about people in our marketing team and are they all talking to customers or not? And in fact, almost all of them are. Like maybe people who look at the analyst side of things, they're not talking to customers, but they're looking at all the data. So they have a lot of other kinds of insights about customers that the rest of the team doesn't have. But our whole product marketing team, for example, they're talking to customers. Most of our new features go through a beta period, and product marketing runs that beta period. So they're talking to customers through that process. Our customer marketing person obviously is talking to a lot of customers to tell those stories. And then our community marketing team, they're talking to customers all the time. So maybe it's the stage we're at where almost everyone in marketing has some sort of customer facing function of their role. And maybe that'll change over time. I don't know, but we are in this stage where everyone does have insights because they are being in front of customers in one way or another.
Mm. Yeah, that's great. And maybe go back to examine a little bit about that comment on scale as you grow and sort of trying to read the tea leaves, or maybe look back to it at Zendesk. Was that something that you guys were really good at, having everybody talk to customers, or was it a different dynamic there?
I think it actually was a little different. We were a very customer focused company because we sold customer service software. In fact, when I joined the company and we had 12 people, what I always thought was unique back then and in hindsight now is normally a 12 person tech company is maybe mostly engineers because they're building the product. But for Zendesk, it was half engineers, half customer service reps, even at that early stage, because the company and the founders were like, customer service is going to be our marketing and sales for a while. So we need to overinvest in it. We need to show these new customers what good customer service looks like. And so we overinvested in that early on. And I always thought that was really interesting. We learned a lot about customers as a team because we thought about it that way.
I feel like we've been doing a little bit of dance through all of your different roles and putting on different hats and touching on a few things, but we have had some good questions come in, so I want to get to some of those. Specifically around self-service, how do you keep sales from not cannibalizing deals that you might have otherwise closed with self-service alone? Is there a separation of church and state at some level within that one funnel that you described?
Yeah, no, that's actually on my mind all the time. Right now at Figma, it's pretty easy because we have our sales team very focused on getting customers into our enterprise tier. And so we have two paid tiers. We have our professional tier and our organization or enterprise tier. And so you can buy our professional tier with a credit card online, and that's mostly self-service, and then sales does the enterprise tier. But we're going to offer all of our plans through a self-service motion pretty shortly here. And so I'm thinking about how do I want to have that separation of church and state. I haven't totally mapped it out perfectly yet, but this probably shouldn't come as a surprise to you, me saying that it'll definitely be an element of what does the customer want, because I have a hard time saying, no, you can't talk to us if you want to buy something from us.
Yeah.
So that'll play a role.
Yeah, it does seem like there's, the right answer is probably, it depends in a lot of cases where there's this gray area where it's like there are certain people who want to buy a very specific way, and as vendors, like it's on us to make sure that we're serving all those different ways effectively for our customers, meeting them
well,
where they
and I think there's a lot of customers out there that still aren't used to buying software as a service, so they don't actually know that they can just purchase with a credit card inside the product. And so there's a little bit of education I find with certain people that say, oh, I would like you to send me a quote for one seat. And you're like, oh, actually, I can make this even easier for you.
We're ahead of that. Here it is.
Yeah.
Look at the page. How does forecasting work in a model that is somewhat complex in that you're trying to manage different sub-products or different offerings?
Yeah, well, we use our finance team and biz ops team. They do some spreadsheet magic where they look at historical data and growth rates of the different numbers in the funnel to come up with a self-service forecast. And then, of course, our sales team has been providing some historical data this year for what we can expect from a conversion rate perspective there. And so we do some jujitsu to marry the two together in one spreadsheet. But it's actually not that complicated. It's just looking at historical data. Because I guess we're lucky that our growth rate's actually been pretty consistent and predictable. And if you have a healthy self-service model, it should be pretty predictable. So maybe that means we're not doing something wildly outrageous to exponentially grow things, but I feel good about our growth rates right now.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, let's take some of the fresher questions. But hey, Amanda, this one's from John. Have you ever used a company-wide current customer metric that all departments are aligned on? So they've looked at churn is one that we've looked at making company-wide, but curious your thoughts on specific metrics that transcend departments and that the whole company is focused on. I've seen NPS used in this way, but curious if you guys are using something like this.
Yeah, so I think we have basically made available all metrics to the whole company. So we're at a stage where we feel comfortable that everyone has access to all of our metrics. And we definitely report in an even more major way on what is our ARR target and actual number there. So everyone is definitely dialed into that, but you can imagine like on the product side, ARR is not necessarily the only metric they're influencing. Active users is another metric that we look at and is maybe a little bit more interesting when you're trying to see what kind of influence have you had with a product launch on your active user number versus some sort of revenue number. So I'd say those are the two that we're currently reporting on right now and looking at together as a company. But it's a good question because I don't feel like I've landed on the one metric that everyone feels very connected to and very able to influence in their day-to-day life.
We'll keep searching for silver bullets. Follow-up question around the online customer community that you guys have described. And this person called out the fact that you are trying to figure out how to serve your customers at scale. I feel like we're all members of a million LinkedIn groups, probably have been in there the one time we signed up, never go back. But then we each have probably a couple of communities that we do spend a lot of time investing in. It sounds like you guys have one of those vibrant communities. Was that something that came, would you say, from inside Figma to start, or was it more these like heroes outside the company and then you guys have moved in to be able to figure out where to add value?
We definitely started one ourselves, but there also are other design communities out there that maybe sometimes we're a part of and sometimes we're not. What I also find super interesting is that we're a very global company for our stage of maturity. And so we have 80% of our active users are outside the US, with a huge community in Russia. And so there's been some Facebook groups or different kind of community groups pop up in Russia with Russian evangelists who moderate, and we actually have nothing to do with it, which is kind of cool. And we have, different specific languages around the world where ambassadors and evangelists have popped up and created communities in those languages. So the challenge for me is making sure that people know it's not Figma from a brand trademark perspective, but I'm also in awe of all of the love around the world and people who want to be part of actively growing our communities. So that's been fun to see.
And is that something, looking forward as we've kind of coming up on the new year, that you're thinking about investing more in, like figuring out how to activate more of those people?
Definitely. We're starting to think about, how can we have a bigger presence in Europe in particular, and where do we want to invest some of our next, big energy. So, but we're very much a global company already, and so I'm thinking about how do we scale that to the next level for sure. Yeah.
Next question comes from Eric, who says, thanks for sharing your story. It's very interesting and motivational, which is awesome, and totally agree. Could you share the steps to build a healthy, self-servable help center? And this person calls out when you were at Zendesk or even for Figma, but maybe just broader, how you think about self-serve help centers fitting into the mix for support and to serve customers.
Yeah, good question. Well, whether you're using Zendesk or another tool, I think about good help centers as, am I getting the answer to my question fast? So I don't, as a user, I don't really care if I talk to a human or I find the answer online. I just want to find that answer fast. So if you give me a VIP phone number and I can call it and get that answer, great. But if you don't want to do that, then your help center for sure needs to have a search bar for one. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of help centers that don't.
Yeah, no, it's true. Yeah.
So that would be number one. And then I also am thinking about this a lot right now. Like, do you write support articles that are short or really long that tell the whole story, or maybe a mix? So I would say you could argue there's cases for both, but that's something to think about. Because maybe I just want the answer to my one question. I don't want to have to read a whole page of information about the whole context around the problem. And then I like to have a mix of media. So some videos, some written, I also like to think about, can you have forums where people can interact with you in your help center? That would be nice.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. How do you, if you leverage your community for help inquiries?
I mean, definitely our product education team thinks about their own roadmap based on what our community does ask in the online community, as well as what we know we're going to be producing from a product roadmap perspective. So yeah, it does play a role. sorry, I forgot what else I wanted to say
No, it's okay.
about
We've
the
touched on a
question.
lot under the
Yeah.
self-serve help center topic for sure. Um, so there's a question here about how, going back to about a little bit more detail about how your support organization is structured. I'm not sure if that's about levels or more about the division of tasks. So maybe take that over.
Sure, sure. It's pretty simple right now. We actually have everyone at the same tier or level, if you will. I think that will evolve over time, but we're still small enough that that's working okay. We have some people dedicated to help center content or what we call product education. We have another person dedicated to community support. And then everyone on the team has other kinds of projects that they do outside of ticket duty, if you will, to just help keep people in a well-rounded position and learning other things besides answering, customer questions. So that could be, they might be involved with our user research group. They might be involved with writing internal documentation. They might be involved with some operational things like building reports and whatnot. So, but yeah, right now the whole team is pretty flat.
Got it. Great. All right. Well, while we're coming up on the top of the hour, but I wanted to make sure that, as we talked about earlier, we're going into the new year. What are some of the things that you're thinking about with all the teams that you manage headed into 2020? Maybe we can start with customer experience.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, we added a few people in Europe, so we're definitely, from a time zone perspective, wanting to make sure that we're covering new customers as we bring them on in the right time zones and what their needs are. I'm a big proponent of one-to-many support, so how can we build out our help center and our community support more? We want to do a lot more video, so we'll be trying to do more video in 2020. What else? At some point, I can imagine us going to a tiered system, but we'll see. I mean, at Zendesk, we had tiers, so tier 1, 2, and 3 support. I don't know if that makes sense for all companies, but for Zendesk, as you can imagine, it was a huge customer support team. So we had a lot of levels of how to route tickets and workflows and all that.
And if I've gotten to know you at all over the last 53 minutes or so, my guess is your customers will be the ones that inform your path forward there.
Good guess, Wes. Good guess.
What about on the sales and marketing sides? Continuing to scale there, but what are some of the things that you're excited about on that end of the business?
I'm super excited for us to do more things in person with customers. So like I mentioned, the user conference we're having in February is probably just the beginning of a lot more face-to-face meetings that we'll be having with our user base. So that's exciting.
Is registration open for that? We can definitely plug the link.
The registration is open for that. If you go to our blog, there's a link from our blog. We just announced it yesterday. So it'll be at the top of the page. And we actually also made a request. We want our users to help be part of what the content is going to be. So we have a call for proposals of people who might want to speak at the event. So yeah, we're really excited about who has already signed up in the last 24 hours.
What are some of the details? Like what location, and then also like who are the speakers and it's intended for mostly designers, but kind of give us a little bit of the elevator pitch on the event.
Yeah, well, it's definitely for designers for sure, whether that's internal teams or freelance designers, or we have a lot of students that use Figma. Everyone is invited. We have a location in mind, but we haven't announced where it is. It's in San Francisco though, and we have a name for it too, but we're wanting to do a little bit of a slow roll in what we unveiled. So we just announced that we're having it, and the date is February 6th. So we're excited. More to come on details.
Very exciting. Great. Okay, yeah, sorry, back to sales and marketing. Anything else outside of the conference? Because I know that is a huge lift. We did our first user conference this year in Philly. Yeah, every team, I think, within the company plays a big role in executing on something like that. So I'm sure that will take a lot of your guys' efforts and energy.
For sure. I'll have to ask you what your lessons learned were from that. But yeah, other things, I mean, I'm just excited about some of the customers that we've been able to acquire this year and seeing their accounts grow over time. You know, some really great names like Microsoft and Airbnb are some of our customers, and so that's just been really fun to work with a lot of different kinds of companies, not just here in the Bay Area, but outside the Bay Area too. More workshops and live streams to be had for sharing what our customer stories are and how they're using the product. But also, I should also mention, it's not just designers that are using Figma, it's developers and marketers and product managers. So the conference will be interesting for all of those folks that are part of the design process at companies, because in fact, half of our users aren't necessarily designers. They're from those departments that work with design.
Mm.
Yeah.
Interesting. So I didn't put this, I didn't prep you for this one, but I love this question. Tim Ferriss asks it of all of his podcast interviewers, so maybe you know it, but if I gave you a billboard in the middle of San Francisco and you couldn't put anything about Figma on there, but you could put a message of any type, you know, what's something that you would love to just tell the world?
Well, we did just do billboards. And the message on it was where teams design together. So those were the 4 words we used beyond the word Figma. But one fun thing that we have seen customers do is have sessions where you bring everyone together and you design things together on the spot. And that's been a fun activity that we've seen people do. So I can imagine a billboard that denotes that in some way visually, because Figma is all about visual design. So something visual would be on the billboard.
Cool. Gosh, I was listening to the head of marketing from Peloton last week at a conference, and he was talking about how they have customers come in and do their classes and in their office, which is kind of like people make pilgrimages on kind of a daily basis. And as you were talking about people designing together, I'm kind of already sort of imagining your event upcoming in February, where people are coming together and maybe doing little design-a-thon, hackathon type things with some of their design heroes that they probably would only otherwise get to know, over the internet in person. So should be some really cool stuff to look for coming out of Figma in 2020.
Yeah, sounds good.
Awesome. Well, as a customer-centric marketer myself, it's been a real pleasure to hear about how you've thought about certainly the CX and sales and marketing motions at Figma. And I wish you a happy Halloween and hope that you get the right amount of Snickers for you today.
Thanks, Wes. I appreciate it. It's been fun.
All right. Have a great day.
You too.